Before I get into this, I just want to go back to a couple of other things. We absolutely did do the whole "what are we here for" thing before all this. And I'd like to think that what we did in our community is what you've been doing in your project. And, you know, my story for 1 minute before this, I didn't finish school. I grew up in a really shitty part of Sheffield, didn't finish school, and went on beyond what society didn't give to me to try and disrupt and create an environment for other people to move on through. And I think I did part of that in PlusNet, and I'm hoping, so I'm going to go on to audacious goal now. Our audacious goal in PlusNet was to build the most efficient service provider in the world, and there's documents to prove it. If you go on my LinkedIn and then go across to another website that's got a lot more swearing in it, by the way, that's got our original "what are we here for?" What are our values, and what are we trying to achieve? My new audacious goal is to turn this into the language of the business community in the country, and to do that before the end of the decade, and to have porous universities, and to have entrepreneurs sharing. And unfortunately, I've opened my big mouth and said I can do that in the boring big public sector world. I'm working on that right now, and hopefully I'll give you a bit of flavour to that through this. So, how do you do 10 years in 15 minutes? Well, I've used up a couple of minutes already, so I've only got 15 minutes left. Lot of stories in there, but one big one. Here's the highlights that the bean counters care about. The measure of success. It's not what I really reflect on. What I reflect on is the stories that I share with a hell of a lot of people. But this is what a lot of people care about. The highlights in the context of a current commercial debate. We were a bootstrap business in the bubble. We didn't raise a load of money. We didn't waste a load of money. We didn't hire a lot of the wrong people. We didn't make a lot of the wrong decisions. We were a bootstrap business that focused on recognising that there's a new way of doing business in this new economy that everyone back then hoped was going to change everything, that the internet, the effect of the internet and how a community approach to doing business was going to radically change everything. And of course you had most people in control of public sector and the economy looking at it and going, yeah, nice fad, nice little plaything. We'll carry on as we are. When I look back on what we did as a very small company in Sheffield, so small and the wrong part of the world, not Silicon Valley, we actually out-innovated, out-profited, out-customer satisfied, and out-shareholder satisfied everyone else in our industry. And I've yet to see KPIs from an internet service provider anywhere in the world that comes anywhere near what we managed to achieve. And the way we did that is collaboration. It was all about something in it for me and the guy or gal working with me and the shareholder and the client and the customer out there, the consumer or the business, the technology, the web design business, the consultants that needed to take this thing called an internet connection and change how you do social care, change how you communicate, change how you buy and sell. We were sat there in the middle of this thing going, we need to build a platform. That platform has to deliver on an environment that fundamentally was completely screwed. What I'm talking about here is the provision around technology within the marketplace as we found it was archaic. It was defined by pre-existing businesses, British Telecom in this case, all of which had set in place structures that didn't allow for innovation to occur. And we sat there and said, okay, screw that, we're going to start from scratch. And what we built was an environment whereby we said, open source is a key building block. The culture around how you interact with each other and the dialogue that you have with your customers is fundamentally the environment where you can identify how you can add value to someone and therefore take money off them, and them not feel bad about it as you do it. The core principles around that, as we were discovering our early stages, became validated by an environment which, I'd like to think is the DNA behind Google, if you dig into what they did as a business with the whole do no evil stuff, and the culture that pervades in this environment today. And that manifesto, as it was then known and is still known today, was Cluetrain. We were sat there conducting an experiment, looking to say, let's change how you ask a customer to deal with you, let's change how you ask supply chain to deal with you, let's ask a different deal with your co-workers. Let's not take advantage, let's not give people the impression that they're given a shot to impart their views and their values. Let's have a real debate. And again, coming back to the couple of previous talks, one of the identifiable models that I look back on was the key to success was getting a brilliant academic mind in the same conversation with somebody with a practical background pertinent to what you're trying to achieve. In our case, it was retail telecom services and customer service and those types of activities. And a bean counter. Sorry, everybody in accounting hates me because I always use that reference, and they don't take it kindly, but it's my attempt to get them to be emotional. And you know what? It works every time. Somebody to regulate. And then we ended up saying to ourselves, hold on a minute, we've got to construct an environment where all this can happen. And we set about creating a framework that was permanent but guaranteed flexibility. And how that manifested itself was a working environment that felt like home, not like work. A working environment where, through the use of software, we could create policies that were acceptable to our customers and business processes internally that were open to challenge. But the things that you couldn't challenge was you can't piss off too many customers and you've got to make some money. So it's an interesting challenge, it's an interesting dynamic fixing those two things together. As you'll see in the background here, there's a whole bunch of frames of reference that if you do take the time beyond any 15 minutes anybody will ever give me, you can dig in and see that there is a way of taking creativity and collaboration and outperforming in a highly competitive commercial environment. So, what is the core message? Open collaboration works, not just in the social sense, not just in the change of business culture sense, but in the most competitive of commercial markets. It also works. And I think we're watching a whole new trend around web services disrupting traditional telecoms infrastructure. And if you dig into what is powering all of that, it is companies, large and small, made up of people who are embracing being open, sharing, and benefiting from storytelling, benefiting from sharing problems in a timely manner. And getting the real benefit, which keeps coming through in every one of these things I keep hearing about, all these talks I keep hearing, creating the opportunity for people with different visions and goals and skills and backgrounds to leverage each other. So open collaboration works. That was then. What am I doing now? Because it's 4 years now since I no longer been involved in PlusNet. Well, what I'm doing now is dealing with this. I spoke about the audacious goal a few minutes ago. This is the problem that I see in the country. We still invent a hell of a lot of stuff disproportionately to our share of the global population. But we don't actually make the money associated with that. We don't develop and influence the supply chains associated with that activity. And I fundamentally think it's because, as is demonstrated what's happening in this room, the world has moved on in terms of the business culture and the business discussion, but far too many business environments and discussions within the UK economy has not. We're still running a very old country on a relatively old physical infrastructure, which still needs upgrading, but more importantly, our business culture hasn't moved on, perhaps even to the extent that some of our academic culture has. That's the ironic thing, or our social care culture has. And that has to change. And the reality is we're not going to deburden ourselves from the debts that we're in as a country unless we change that stat there. How am I doing that? Well, the environment as I see it, as a person working on a local public sector partnership, so private-public sector, having dialogue directly with central government, this is the environment that we now face. We are in a global economy. We have, from a boring governance perspectives, local enterprise partnerships and central government trying to figure out how to pay for the sins of the past and build a decent future. But at least there's one recognition, which is why I'm still getting out of bed every morning and telling my wife why I'm not just being a dad all the time, and that is there's a need for a new approach. Now, it's taking time to implement that new approach. That approach has to focus on the real assets we have in this country. And the government has given us a decent start by saying it's about innovation in growth markets where technology can be applied and transferring those opportunities into some of the broader economic activity within the UK. And all of that activity, same word again, all of that activity giving us the ability to change the country's balance sheet so that we can move from being heavily indebted and cash rich again, to cash rich again, and be able to develop some of the infrastructure that still needs upgrading around the country. All of that has to result in something that those of us that are still here, again, picking up on a point earlier, it is about us now getting it right so the kids can take it forward. Because in the context of this discussion, we are not going to finish the job of the UK finishing off something that should have been done 20, 30 years ago. The kids will. We've got to create a picture for the kids to buy into, stay here and take this forward. And that same picture is what actually will energise us to dig in and do the really hard work. Because one of the hardest messages I'm giving out to people is, sorry, we're not going to be the beneficiaries of all this. We will be able to, climb into our resting place knowing that we were part of change, or at least trying to make change. But it's about the kids and the grandkids coming through to actually take that forward and take all the benefit from it. The target, the problem I talked earlier, it's dead simple. We cannot carry on having such a rich innovation capability and not having 10 Googles, 1,000 PlusNets, 5,000 technophobias. We need a hell of a lot more businesses up and down the country developing and commercialising the talent and the energy and the ideas that we have unlocked. And I think for me it's a very simple proposition. We've got a job to do of finishing modernise a country. If we do that really well, we could create a whole bunch of products and services and cultures and processes that we could sell to a whole bunch of other people around the world that either need to modernise themselves or are about to go through a learning curve of what it means to become a big, good governance environment, well-run, responsible country. And what I'm talking about there is if we refresh and renew what's good about this country and present it in a modern infrastructure and a technology context, we could sell all that stuff to the emerging growth countries, the BRIC countries. So, I think there's a wonderful opportunity that we must take, which is get this done so that we can have a good place to live and work in. But the real big carrot out there is if we do this really well, one of our last biggest assets is people around the world kind of like dealing with us. Let's do these things. Let's empower the people that we've got in our community, and let's leverage that before people start turning around saying, you know what, the Brits used to invent some good stuff. The Brits were good to deal with. They had brilliant engineers. They cared socially. What happened to them? I don't want to be there. I want to be flying around the world going, yeah, less than 100 million people, but look at the impact that those guys are having on the world. I don't think I could say anything after that last bit, other than to say, thanks for tolerating me. You're all busy people, and I hope I can touch you in some way going forward, in a good way, that is, before someone says anything. Yeah, I know. And if you can, I need your help. One mini target. This is a fringe event, and up the hill, it's all about Dragon's Den. I think Dragon's Den's awful. Culturally, it is not how value is created. This is. Short-term goal, let's see if this can't be the centre of the Made Festival, not a fringe event. Thanks, guys.